Welcome to social psychology. Today we're going over chapter 10. We're going to be talking about aggression or aggressive behavior. These are the things we're going to cover. Not everything today. We break it up into two lectures, but yeah, we're going to talk about aggression, what it is. We're going to define it and talk about different types. Then we're going to get into the goals of aggressive behavior, which are right there. And of course, related research to those goals. And then at the end, not today, but at the end of the next lecture, we'll talk about some techniques for reducing violence. Not a whole lot there. Most of the research is on actually what causes aggressive behavior and not a whole bunch as to how to actually make it any better. But we'll say a little bit about that at the end of this chapter, at the end of this lecture. Not this lecture, but the next lecture, okay? So what is aggression? Here's one definition of aggression, right? Aggression is behavior intended to injure another. Okay, that's very simple. Aggression is any behavior, right, where you meant to hurt somebody. Okay, it has to be behavior. Okay, it means you have to do something to people. It can't be that you're mad at them. That's not aggressive behavior. Okay, it has to be behavior. You must actually do something. Say something, right? Physically, verbally, do something, okay? And it has to be intended. It cannot be accidental. If it's accidental, it's not aggressive behavior. Okay, so if you accidentally trip somebody, that's not aggressive behavior. You didn't mean to hurt them. Or if you're playing football and you tackle someone, you didn't mean to hurt them. You weren't necessarily being aggressive, although some people would still call that aggressive behavior, but you didn't mean to hurt them, right? If you hurt them, you just basically were trying to stop them. Okay, and it has to be aimed at hurting another person, right? Your goal has to be to hurt them, not that you're being assertive or that you're being playful on the football field or things like that. It's really that you wanted to hurt them. That is aggressive behavior. It has to be intended, it has to be behavior, and it has to be aimed at hurting somebody. Okay. And there's different kinds of aggression. And these are just some of the broad categories of aggression, okay? There's others that fall into these categories. So there's indirect aggression, direct aggression, emotional aggression, instrumental aggression. Okay, and let's go through each of these and give an example. So the first one, indirect aggression. So indirect aggression is a type of aggression where you don't really confront someone, okay? You try to hurt someone, but without really confronting them. It's an attempt to hurt another without obvious face-to-face conflict. It's like when you go behind somebody's back, so to speak. Like when you're spreading rumors, okay, that your ex has herpes or something like that, or spreading a rumor about someone, right? You want to hurt their reputation. You want to hurt them. You want to make them look bad. You don't go up to them and say something mean or hit them, right? What you do is you try to hurt them in an indirect way. Or you tell the boss that they're always showing up late to get them fired. That's aggressive behavior as well. Okay? But it's indirect. You're not doing it to their face. You're doing it behind their back, so to speak. That's indirect aggression. And of course, there is direct aggression, which is the opposite. Well, not really the opposite, but that's different. It's behavior intended to hurt someone to his or her face. Like when you punch someone in the face, right? When you actually confront someone and you cuss them out or you beat them up, you stab them, kick them, right? It can come in many different forms. But when you do it to their face, that's direct aggression. Okay? There's also emotional aggression. Emotional aggression is basically aggressive behavior that comes from angry feelings. It's aggression that's driven by emotions, so to speak. You're angry, you're frustrated, you feel awful, and you hurt someone. Okay, that's emotional aggression. Hurtful behavior that stems from angry feelings. Usually aggression is driven by anger, but it could be frustration, could be annoyance, could be other types of negative emotions. But that's emotional aggression. And it means that you hurt somebody and you were pissed off, you were frustrated, you were mad while you did it. Like an enraged person throws a chair at a coworker, right? He's mad and he threw a chair at someone. That's aggressive behavior. That is emotional aggression, to be more specific. And emotional aggression is different from what we call instrumental aggression. Instrumental aggression is a type of aggressive behavior where you hurt someone, not because you're mad at them, but you hurt someone because they're kind of in the way. You hurt someone to accomplish a non-aggressive goal. Like you kill somebody for money. You didn't kill them because you hate them or because you were mad at them. You just wanted their money or you wanted their jewelry. Or for instance, you push somebody out of the way because you wanted to be next in line, right? Your goal was to be next in line, not really to hurt them, okay? That's instrumental aggression. It's the kind of aggression where, you hurt somebody because they're kind of in the way. They got the money you want, they got the jewelry you want, or they got the place, they have the place in line that you want. Or maybe they have the job that you want. And you basically, I don't know, you kidnap them, you do something to them so that they don't show up to work and then you can take over their job or something like that. That's instrumental aggression. A lot of this aggression is like the aggression like you get from like from the mob or something like that, or gangsters. Sometimes they end up hurting you, killing you, that kind of stuff. Not because they hate you or they're mad at you, but because you're in their territory, you're in the way. They're trying to do their illegal business and you're in the way. Okay, they don't know you. They don't hate you. They just want you out of their way. Or they get rid of you because they don't want you to call the police or something like that. That's kind of instrumental aggression. Okay, you don't really want to hurt them, but you end up hurting them because you want something else. Okay, so those are the four main categories. Indirect is kind of like the opposite of direct. And then you have emotional, which is when you hurt someone because you're mad at them. And then you have instrumental, when you hurt someone, but you're not necessarily mad at them. And then there are other forms of aggression that fall within these categories, like verbal aggression, physical aggression. It's obvious what those are. And we'll talk about those, but they could fall into these categories, depending whether you're mad at them, depending whether you're doing it to their face or not. Now, other gender differences in aggressive behavior are there, well, sex differences to be more specific, right? Other differences between males and females when it comes to aggressive behavior. According to research, there's no clear difference in reporting feelings of anger. In other words, both men and women get equally upset. They get equally angry. But females or girls use more indirect aggression. When females are aggressive, they're more likely to say mean things, to spread rumors, to do that kind of stuff, to hurt you behind your back. Whereas men are more likely to directly hurt you, to engage in direct aggression. They're more likely to do physical harm to you directly. Both men and women are aggressive, but they prefer different forms of aggression. That doesn't mean women cannot be physically aggressive or directly aggressive. They can be, but most of the time they choose to be aggressive in other ways. Men, when they're aggressive, most of the time it's physically. Okay, so are men more aggressive than women? We've heard a lot that in the past, maybe that suggests that men are more aggressive than women, but that's only because we usually think of aggression as something physical. If we just think about aggression in general, it could also be verbal, it could be non-physical, it could be indirect. If you think about that, then men and women are both equally aggressive. However, when it comes to physical aggression, when it comes to things like violence and homicide, that's direct physical aggression, men are much more aggressive. Like you can see here, this graph here, right, of the percentage of reported homicides over the past 3 decades. Oh, this research is old, okay? But anyway, it makes the point. Nowadays, it's still the same thing, but you can see throughout history that men commit the vast majority of homicides. Men's aggression is usually more physical. They're the ones who are more likely to kill someone, much more likely than women. Men commit like 80 to 90% of the homicides out there when it comes to somebody getting killed. It's men. There's a small percentage of women who do that. Actually, it's a small percentage of men too who kill somebody. Most men don't kill anybody. But violent crime, homicide, stuff like that, men do that a lot more than women. Women engage in other forms of aggressive behavior that is not likely going to end up killing someone or not likely going to end up necessarily being physical, although they can also do the same thing. Men are much more dangerous, okay? Now, what are the goals of aggressive behavior? What are we trying to accomplish when we're aggressive? According to research, it's 4 things. We're trying to cope with feelings of annoyance, and we'll talk about what that means. Sometimes we're trying to gain material and social rewards. We'll talk about that. Sometimes we're trying to gain or maintain social status. And sometimes we're trying to protect ourselves or other people. Those are the goals. So let's talk about the first one and see what we mean by that. Actually, when it comes to coping with feelings of annoyance, right? We're going to talk about frustration and what that does. We'll talk about arousal, irritability, unpleasant situation, frustrations, perceptions, personal choices. All these things have to do with coping with feelings of annoyance. So one reason we're aggressive is because we want to cope with feelings of annoyance. And really, this gets at, the cause of aggressive behavior, okay? Frustration is one of those things that, one of those feelings of annoyance, frustration. When you're frustrated, well, it means that you are kind of annoyed, irritated, that something's not happening and you want it to happen. Frustration is also like goal blocking. Something or someone is keeping you from doing something that you want to do, and you get frustrated, okay? One of the earliest explanations of aggressive behavior is called the frustration-aggression hypothesis. First proposed by Dollard, actually Dollard and Miller. I don't have a year for you guys, but this was probably in the 60s, okay? Or maybe a little bit earlier. But the frustration-aggression hypothesis, it says that frustration always leads to aggressive behavior. Frustration is blocking goal-directed behavior. Frustration, like you want to eat, but someone won't let you, and you get frustrated. Or you want to get to work, but there's a bunch of traffic. Something's blocking you, and you get frustrated. Or you want sex, but somebody won't give it to you, and you get frustrated, okay? The frustration-aggression hypothesis says that frustration always leads to aggressive behavior. Always. And that's a very bold statement. And right away, when this was proposed, a bunch of people challenged it and said, no, this isn't true. Frustration doesn't always lead to aggressive behavior. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on several other things, right? Just because you want to get to work and you're frustrated and people are in your way, there's traffic, doesn't mean that you're going to ram your car into those other cars or that you're necessarily going to be honking your horn. You might be honking your horn because you're frustrated, but sometimes you don't, and you hold it in. Sometimes you don't behave that way. Many times you do, by the way. Just because you're frustrated, you want sex, and your spouse isn't giving it to you, does that mean you're going to be aggressive? Not necessarily, okay? Sometimes you just have to hold it in, so to speak. But sometimes aggression is not in the form that we expect. It doesn't mean that the man, for instance, let's say he's just sexually frustrated, right? And this, spouse won't give him any sex. It doesn't mean that he's gonna get her and force her and rape her, right? That's not what it means. Or that he's gonna beat her up because he's frustrated. Although that can happen and has happened to many couples, right? Domestic violence sometimes can be intensified because of those things. But sometimes it could be aggression in other ways. Sometimes maybe he's just mean and yells at her and cusses at her. That's still aggressive behavior. He's frustrated, right? And he's not getting what he wants. But it doesn't always have to lead to aggressive behavior. And a lot of researchers challenge this right from the start. Berkowitz, which is one of the biggest names in aggressive behavior, came along and revised the frustration-aggression hypothesis. And what he said is that frustration leads to what he called emotional aggression, not instrumental aggression, not instrumental aggression, okay? Frustration doesn't lead to instrumental aggression, okay? Because you can, you don't have to feel annoyed or frustrated, and you could still, let's say, kill somebody for their money. That doesn't have to be driven by frustration. So frustration only leads to emotional aggression, right? Angry aggression, aggression that involves negative feelings, and only to the extent that it generates negative feelings, right? Frustration leads to emotional aggression to the extent that it generates negative feelings. So frustration will lead to aggression if you get annoyed, angry, right? Pissed off, that kind of thing. That's what Berkowitz is saying. But even then, by the way, it may not happen. And we'll eventually get to Berkowitz's theory, which this is a part of, and you'll see that there are cases in which aggression is not the result. Okay, but that was one of the first explanations of aggression, is the frustration-aggression hypothesis, right? That if we are frustrated, we're going to behave aggressively, but it's not always the case. Other things that may make you aggressive, right? So this is the first goal here. One reason why we're aggressive is we want to cope with feelings of annoyance, right? So we're aggressive because we're frustrated, or because we're aroused, we're irritable, okay? That kind of stuff. Another theory that tries to explain aggressive behavior is called excitation transfer theory, proposed by Zillman in the 70s. Okay, excitation transfer theory says that anger is physiologically similar to other emotions or other emotional states, and any form of emotional arousal can enhance aggressive responses. So what this says is that because anger is similar to other physiological arousal, any emotion that also increases physiological arousal will increase aggression. An example here, students were more aggressive after watching a non-violent erotic film, or after exercising after riding an exercise bike. What does watching a erotic film do? One that doesn't involve any violence, okay? An erotic film, what does it do? It increases sexual arousal. And according to Zillman, that arousal will transfer and enhance feelings and basically enhance aggressive behavior. So if you think about it, right? If you are pissed off, you can be aggressive, okay? But if you are pissed off and also sexually aroused, you can be even more aggressive. Okay, that's what Zillman is saying here. He's saying that anything that is similar to anger, anything that increases physiological arousal, will intensify aggressive behavior. Even after riding an exercise bike, you're riding an exercise bike and that gets the blood flowing, right? It increases physiological arousal. If somebody then pisses you off, you will be more aggressive than if somebody pissed you off when you had not been exercising. And similar things can happen, for instance, to professional athletes. Basketball game happening, right? You're running up and down the court. Your heart is racing, right? Your blood's flowing fast. You're exercising. You're going through all this physical activity. And then somebody fouls you really hard, right? And that pisses you off because you have been running around and you're physiologically aroused. You're more likely to get into a fist fight with that person. And it has happened many times. But if you're running up and down, right, and they just foul you, but not too hard, you kind of let it go. Not too big of a deal. But if it's a really hard foul that pisses you off, then a fight is likely to result. Okay. That's the thing. Let me explain something about excitation transfer that may not be obvious from what it says here. Excitation transfer only works when you are already pissed off, when you're provoked, when you're angry. If you're riding an exercise bike, and then let's say that there's someone you could behave aggressively toward, you're not going to be more aggressive if you haven't been on an exercise bike, if they don't do anything to you. You're not going to be more aggressive after watching a pornographic film than if you haven't been watching it if they didn't piss you off. It's only when they piss you off, when they make you angry, when they do something like that, when they provoke you, that the excitation will transfer and intensify the aggressive behavior. And how do I know this? Because I did this kind of research. And we looked at all this stuff, right? And we did something called a meta-analysis, in which we analyzed all the studies that have to do with excitation transfer. We did a study of studies. That's called the meta-analysis. And we basically found out it only works when there's provocation. Excitation transfer only works when there's provocation. The excitation only intensifies aggression when there's something else that provokes you, that pisses you off. In the absence of that, it doesn't. Okay? And that's something important to realize. Other reasons you may be aggressive, or the reason you can be aggressive, one goal is to cope with feelings of annoyance. And sometimes that feeling of annoyance can be pain, okay? Pain, okay? Pain can increase aggressive behavior. A study showed that students in one experiment were asked to place their hands in either painfully cold water or water closer to room temperature. So an experiment was done where students were subjected to pain. Now we're not allowed to actually, basically physically like hurt people in so many ways, right? We can't like punch people, slap them, shock them, stab them, or anything like that, right? To make them experience pain. But there is one way that is allowed, and that's by getting a bucket of ice water and having participants, or in this case, students, because they're usually students, these participants, stick their hands in this bucket of painfully cold water. They stick their hand in the water, it's very cold, and if they hold it there for several seconds, after a while, their hand will begin to hurt. Okay? Those that put their hand in this bucket of painfully cold water, whose hand started to hurt, were more aggressive, more willing to deliver electric shocks to another student, to another participant. Now, here's the thing, though. They didn't really shock somebody else. They just think they are, because no one is really getting shocked. No one is being hurt in that way. So those people were more aggressive than those that were just holding their hand in a bucket of water at room temperature. That's not painful. Those people were less aggressive. So when you're in pain, you're more likely to be more aggressive. And think about that. You have a headache, or maybe your leg hurts, you're sore from too much exercising, or you're sore from work because you'd say your job is very physical, or you're sick, right? Or you have an injury. Maybe you have a broken rib or whatever it is, a broken leg or some injury. You are likely to be more aggressive when you feel that pain. It doesn't mean you'll beat people up more necessarily, but yes, you will have a tendency to yell at people more and cuss out people more, and that is aggressive behavior as well. Verbal aggression, but it is aggressive behavior. Yes, pain makes you more aggressive. And you know what else? Heat. Heat is another unpleasant situation. Heat makes you more aggressive. Plenty of research has shown that high temperatures are associated with more aggressive horn honking. When it's hot, and let's say you're not using the AC in your car, you're more likely to honk at people when it's hot. Again, probably when they piss you off, because maybe you're stuck in traffic or something like that. So also, high temperatures are also associated with an increase in assaults. People are more likely to just beat each other up, murder each other, kill each other when it's hot. Heat is unpleasant, and it makes you more aggressive. There's also a higher increase in urban riots. People are just more likely to riot when it's hot than when it's cold. Even major league pitchers throwing more balls at batters. Pitchers hitting the batter with the baseball, right? Deliberately doing that. That's aggressive behavior. When it's hot, they're more likely to do that. Heat increases aggressive behavior. Now, while you may be thinking, wait a minute, there's other explanations for this, right? like, okay, assaults, murders, all this stuff. So maybe it's not the temperature that's making people more aggressive. Maybe it's just the fact that there's more people out. And when there's more people out, people piss each other off and they're likely to kill each other and assault each other. So there's also that explanation that it's maybe just the number of people that are out. More people are out when it's hot than when it's cold. When it's cold, there's going to be less aggressive behavior because it's cold and people are not out. But I will tell you that heat does increase aggressive behavior even by itself, because they've also done experiments in the laboratory. Well, they will basically, put someone in a very hot room, like the AC isn't working and it's a hot day. And they'll have a participant in that hot room, uncomfortably hot. And then they give that an opportunity to that participant to hurt somebody, maybe to shock somebody, but they don't really get to hurt anybody. They just think they are, okay? And yes, in the laboratory where they have basically isolated the heat away from other things, right? They have shown that yes, heat makes people more aggressive. It's unpleasant. Other things, other unpleasant things, poverty. Guess what? Poverty is unpleasant. It is difficult. Poverty makes you frustrated. It makes you mad. It's unpleasant. Historical research has found that lynchings from 1882 to 1930 were related to cotton prices. And lynchings, yes, this is when Black people were lynched, sometimes killed by white people. Why? Because cotton prices dropped or crashed, and all of a sudden the crop isn't worth that much, and the farmers lose a lot of money. And what do? Take it out on Black people and beat up the Black people, right? Lynch them. Later analysis showed that lynchings were highest when recession was followed by economic well-being. There were more lynchings when things were relatively good and then things got bad. Okay, that's when there were more lynchings. Okay, they were doing well and all of a sudden things got bad, prices went down, and now they didn't have a lot of money. Now they were poor. Okay, this supports a frustration hypothesis. Poverty is frustrating and it makes people more aggressive. And you wonder why there's more crime, the more problems in bad neighborhoods. Not in bad neighborhoods, I say in poor neighborhoods, right? Poor neighborhoods are usually more likely to be bad neighborhoods because poverty is awful. Poverty is frustrating. Poverty makes people mad. Poverty is just a difficult thing to deal with. And you're just more likely to hurt people, more likely to yell at people, more likely to assault people, or rob people, more likely to do all sorts of things to people when you're poor. It doesn't mean that everyone will, but enough people will that it'll be a bad neighborhood. For the most part, poor neighborhoods are usually bad neighborhoods for that reason, because of the frustration. But most people will not be committing crime. Okay, most people are not going to do that. But it only takes, a few people to ruin the neighborhood, a few people to make it dangerous. A handful of people, That's the thing about poverty. It's awful. Okay, and you wonder why there's less crime and in richer neighborhoods, right? And that there's certain kinds of people in those kind of neighborhoods, and you say that it's race and stuff like that, and that it's like just white people are just less aggressive. No, they're not. They're just living in better neighborhoods and are just better off. They're not as frustrated as Black people, as Latinos, as people who are poor. And that explains the difference. It's not really ethnicity. It's not really that sort of stuff. Yeah, give those poor people a bunch of money and you'll see they're not going to be causing problems anymore. They're not going to be committing crime anymore, right? All of a sudden, give them a good job. You'll see, right? All of a sudden, they won't be doing all that stuff, right? Poverty is frustrating, okay? And frustration, remember, leads to aggression. Not always, but it can for some people, and that's what ruins the neighborhood. Relative deprivation is also a thing which relates to this, relates to poverty. See, here in the US, there are people who are poor and who live in poor neighborhoods that are usually bad neighborhoods with more crime and problems. But these people are actually not poor compared to other people in other countries, like the country where I'm from, in Salvador, right? Poverty there is a whole nother level of poverty. Or you go to Haiti, other places, those people are poor. Compared to them, we're doing well, even if you're poor here. So there's this thing is like, why the heck are you frustrated then? Right? Because it's relative. It's relative to those that are around you. The feeling that one has less than others to whom one compares oneself. When you're in the US, you don't compare your level of difficulty and your poverty with people in El Salvador or in Haiti or in other countries, third world countries. No, that's not what you compare yourself to. You compare yourself to the other people, the people who are doing okay, the middle class, the upper class. And relative to them, you're doing much worse. And you feel a lot worse. And you feel that your life sucks a lot more. And that's why we have those problems. It's frustration. But you go to another country, and now your poverty is actually, middle class. And in those countries, you won't feel so bad. And you probably won't be as frustrated. It's relative, okay? Even rich people can feel poor relative to other rich people. It sounds ridiculous, right? But yeah, I mean, I've heard some of these celebrity gossip, I remember this one guy once complaining about, I know this is going to make me sound old, complaining about Lindsay Lohan. He was not complaining about her, but talking about her and trying to make her look bad. And this guy was a rich kid whose dad was some big time producer. They were worth hundreds of millions of dollars or something like that. And basically talking badly about Lindsay Lohan, saying that, oh, Lindsay Lohan is so poor. She's only worth like $7 million. Can you believe that? She's so poor. That's like really poor. That's what he was saying. $7 million. Can you believe that? The hell, that's rich, right? But for those celebrities, oh, $7 million? Oh, forget about it. You're down there, right? They call you poor, but you're not. But yeah, I'm sure that someone with $7 million in Hollywood probably feels more frustrated than someone with $100 million, right? Someone who's just barely making it in Hollywood to someone who's a big shot. The people who are, that's not barely making it, okay? But let's just say that you can be making hundreds of thousands of dollars and you can still feel poor. You can still feel like you're being cheated. Like, why the hell is people making millions of dollars and I only get this, right? But to us, hundreds of thousands of dollars sounds like, oh my God, that's awesome, right? Because we're making a lot less than that. It's relative, okay? It's relative deprivation. But poverty is frustrating, but it's a relative thing. And by the way, keep in mind that in this country also, things cost a lot more. So money doesn't go as far here as it does in other countries. And that's why you can be a lot richer if you move to another country. Other things, frustrations, perceptions, personal choices. Here's the thing. We're going to try to put these things together now, right? Because if we've been talking about this, right? Things that cause aggressive behavior, right? Anger, frustration, heat, poverty, pain. What do all these things have in common? They are all unpleasant. So we're trying to cope with feelings of annoyance. We're trying to cope with unpleasant feelings. Berkowitz, in his cognitive neo-association theory, tries to explain how it all works, how all those things interact to lead to aggressive behavior. And this is probably the best theory of aggressive behavior that's out there. Cognitive neo-association theory says that any unpleasant situation, whether it's anger, pain, poverty, heat, frustration, whatever it is, any unpleasant situation triggers a complex chain of internal events that includes negative emotions, negative thoughts, and that there's other cues in the environment that will determine whether the negative feelings will be expressed as as aggression or flight. That doesn't sound like much. What he's saying is this, okay? Any unpleasant situation will trigger negative emotions and negative thoughts. And those can then lead to either aggression or maybe running away, fight or flight. Okay? let me show you a flow chart so this can make more sense to you. Although it's not simple, but I'll explain it to you guys. It's actually easy when you think about it, but it sounds like it's complicated. So we start at the top there. This is cognitive neo-association theory by Berkowitz, and Berkowitz is probably the biggest name in aggression research. But the theory says that any unpleasant experience, it could be pain, it could be heat, it could be poverty, anything unpleasant will basically lead to negative feelings. Okay? Negative feelings, okay? That could be anger, it could be annoyance, frustration, okay? And those negative feelings can then trigger angry thoughts and associations, like I'm gonna kill someone, I'm gonna beat this person up, that kind of stuff. And that can lead to fight, that can lead to aggressive behavior. The negative feelings, however, can also lead to fearful thoughts and association. So maybe you have an unpleasant experience, right? Maybe it's pain or something like that, right? That leads to the negative feeling. Maybe it's annoyance, frustration, whatever it is, or maybe something else. That can also make you fearful. That can lead to fearful thoughts and association, which will lead to you running away instead of fighting. The box there that says objects or events priming aggression, let me explain that. Other things in the environment can increase angry thoughts and associations or fearful thoughts and associations. Actually, the line is just pointing to angry thoughts or associations. Other things in the environment can trigger angry thoughts and associations, which will make it more likely that you're going to fight, more likely to behave aggressively. Let me give you an example so this makes sense to you, okay? There was a student of mine at the college who was actually robbed at the college. She was, I don't know if you call this an assault. She was assaulted, right? Somebody basically came up to her and just grabbed her purse and snatched it away from her and ran off. That's the unpleasant experience that she felt, right? She got robbed, basically. I don't know if you call it an assault, okay? But I don't, not familiar with those terms, but she was robbed, just to make it clear, right? She was robbed. That, of course, led to negative feelings, okay? Negative feelings. It's, annoying to get robbed or frustrated, whatever you want to call it. It led to negative feelings, okay? And here's the thing. When she first told me about it, okay, she was angry. That was the negative feelings. She was angry that this has happened to her. And she had those angry thoughts and associations. She had these thoughts. I hope this person dies. I want to kill him. If I see him again, I'm going to hurt him, that kind of stuff, right? And that can lead to aggressive behavior. It didn't in this case because, of course, he wasn't around. Okay, the guy had left. Okay? But you can see how the negative feelings, right? I mean, how the unpleasant experience being robbed led to the anger, and the anger led to the angry thoughts of hurting someone, of killing someone, right? And how that's likely to lead to aggressive behavior. But at a later time, she was talking to me about it again, and she told me, yeah, I was robbed, right? That's the unpleasant experience. And she experienced negative feelings as well. It made her angry that she was robbed. But then she also started thinking, wait a minute. This person took my purse. He has my license. And he knows where I live. What if he comes to my house and kills me and robs me again? So that led to fearful thoughts. And those were fearful thoughts and associations. And then she wanted to run away. She wanted to stop coming to class and stop coming to school. She was scared because of that. She actually didn't want to be in where she lived either. She was scared. But you see how that works. The unpleasant feeling, no matter what it is, that leads to negative feelings. And if those negative feelings lead to fear and fear-related thoughts, you want to run away. If those negative feelings lead to angry-related thoughts and associations, like wanting to hurt someone, that's more likely to lead to aggressive behavior. And there's objects in the environment that can prime the situation, that can make the anger more likely. okay? And we'll talk about some of those things, what those things are. That's what the theory says, okay? And if you follow it, right, it's actually simple, okay? Unpleasant experiences lead to negative feelings. Those negative feelings can be anger, frustration, annoyance, whatever it is. They can trigger angry thoughts and associations, which lead to aggression, or they can trigger fearful thoughts and associations, which will lead to wanting to run away and wanting to hide. Okay, in one instance, aggression results. In another one, aggression does not result. More about this. Annoyance leads to changes in perception or situations. So here's the thing. There are things in the environment that can affect the situation, right? That can basically make it more likely that you're going to have anger-related thoughts and associations, okay? Cognitive neo-association theory explains what's called the weapons effect. The weapons effect is the tendency for weapons, such as guns, to enhance aggressive thoughts, feelings, and actions. Here's the thing. If you live in a home and you have guns there, maybe you have them on display in a case because you love guns and you love those weapons, and you have on display there like trophies. Or maybe you have swords and you have them like crossed, like, you know, like a display of art, right? Or even pictures of knives or guns, tanks, fighter jets, things like that. Things related to aggressive behavior, things that could be weapons. If you have those kind of things around, that's more likely to trigger the aggressive, the anger-related thoughts and associations. It's more likely to trigger the anger-related thoughts and associations that are more likely to result in aggressive behavior. Those are the objects. Those are the things that can prime, that can lead to that stuff. That's more likely to trigger aggressive behavior. So guess what? If you're in a home with guns, let's say, and the guns are right there on display, and somebody really pisses you off, something unpleasant happens, and you get pissed off and you get angry, the fact that those guns are there, the fact that those weapons are there, is going to intensify those feelings of anger and associated thoughts of wanting to hurt someone. And then you're more likely to grab that gun and actually kill someone than if that gun was not there. And it doesn't have to be guns. Like I said, it could be swords, even pictures of weapons, tanks, you know, things like that, knives, pictures of knives. Everyone has knives, but usually they're put away somewhere, right? But if you have them on display, that can trigger anger-related thoughts more. It's like if there's something there and you're pissed off or you're feeling awful, and there's something there. There's a knife, there's a gun, there's a sword. If those things are present, that is going to help trigger other thoughts of violence, of aggression. That is more dangerous, and that's more likely to lead to aggressive behavior. There's an experiment that was done to show you the impact of the weapons effect. Here's the thing. So it's actually just the results here. Let me explain. So in the vertical line there with the numbers 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 6, that's the number of shocks delivered to another subject. That's how aggressive the participants were. Now remember, no one really gets shocked. That's not allowed. They just think they're hurting someone. Okay. And then you have on one side, right? You have that blue, the blue and white bars there. One side it says other subject rewarding, right? Those participants were not exposed to, those participants were exposed to someone who was nice. And then you have the other side that says other subject annoying. Those participants were exposed to someone who was mean and who pissed them off. The blue bars indicate when weapons were present, and the white bar indicates when weapons were not present. So you can see when the other person treats you well, right? Having weapons in the room does not make you more aggressive. If people treat you nice, it's not a big deal. If there's guns there, or if there's swords there, or things that increase anger-related thoughts and associations. Weapons did not increase aggression when participants were not annoyed. But when the other subject is annoying, when somebody pisses you off, right? That's when weapons increased aggressive behavior. And in that case there, you can see the blue bar is much higher, right? It's higher than the, not much higher, but it's higher than the white bar. Those people were more aggressive than those that were not exposed to weapons. Both of them, those that not exposed to weapons and those exposed to weapons, they were both more aggressive, okay, than in the other cases. Because somebody pissed them off. Someone pisses you off, you're gonna be more aggressive. But if there's weapons present, you're gonna be a little bit more aggressive than if those weapons weren't there. And it makes sense. According to Berkowitz's theory, when you have things in the room that are weapons, they increase anger and aggression related thoughts. And those things are likely to intensify aggression. It seems to have an effect. It's not a huge effect, but it makes a difference. Just think about it this way, right? If you're pissed off, if you're having an argument with someone, fighting with someone, especially if it's a heated argument, it's not good to have a weapon around. It's more likely to be used when you're pissed off, okay? If it's not there and you're pissed off, it can't be used. In that case, that's even more dangerous. You know what, guys? We're about halfway. Why don't we stop there so we can have some discussion if you guys want to discuss these things. So let me go ahead and stop recording.